And welcome back to more political chatter. In this video, we will be talking about my updated election prediction for 2024, President Joe Biden against former President Donald Trump. This is definitely a video that is overdue. I like to do these every month or so that we could grasp how this election is changing over time and who is in the lead month by month, or whichever time period it may be. So it is definitely time for my updated election prediction between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, as well as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who we increasingly, as he gets on more ballots across the nation, we have to consider him more as he does achieve these ballot access measures across the nation. So looking at the general election polling right now, the Real Clear Politics average has Donald Trump leading by 2.7%. He's at 41.5%, to Biden's 38.8%, to Kennedy's 10.8%, to Cornel West's 2%, and Jill Stein's 1.5%. And then looking at the two-way between Biden and Trump, we see that Trump's lead decreases to just 1.1%. And you'll see, I don't know why it's not showing this, but it usually gives me right here this day in history, in 2020, to see how the polls were looking in the 2020 race. And it doesn't show it here, but about this time in history, Biden was leading by about 4.5%. So, Donald Trump definitely making up some ground from 2016, obviously. So starting with our safe Democratic states, as we always do, the states that we know will go to Joe Biden no matter what, by a safe margin. So we have 4 characterizations for states. A safe state, which is a 15% margin or more. A likely state, which is a 5 to 15% margin. A lean state, which is a 1 to 5% margin. And a tilt state, which is a state with a margin of less than 1% to their respective party. So starting with the states that we know will go to Joe Biden no matter what, and by over 15%. That's states like Hawaii, California, Washington, states that we know are not going anywhere. Washington, D.C., Maryland, probably Delaware since that's his home state, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, I would say Connecticut, even though that one's a little iffy. Vermont, I would say, of course. And then looking at Illinois, some of these are tough. Yeah, Illinois was very close to being likely back in 2020, so I would leave off of that one right now. And then we see that Biden won Maine's first by 23 back in 2020. These are the 2020 results, by the way, in case you're confused why I keep going back to that. But those are to see the results from 2020, which of course helps us characterize states. That puts Joe Biden at 140 electoral votes. Of course, 270 are needed to win. As for Donald Trump, he would win by over 15%. States like Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota, Nebraska at large, as well as the 1st District of Nebraska, the 3rd District of Nebraska, and that 1st District. Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, Indiana would all be safe. Looking at South Carolina, that voted for him by 12%. Back in 2020, I would say that he does gain enough in South Carolina to make a safe state. So that, after all the safe state characterizations, that puts Joe Biden at 140, Donald Trump at 122. Donald Trump has some ground to gain, but they typically do. The Republicans in presidential elections typically do make up that ground after the likely state characterizations. They have quite a few likely states that always go to them. So that does bring us to the likely states. These are states that will be decided by a 5 to 15% margin. So these are states that will be a bit closer, but we generally do know how they are going to vote, and it would be a surprise if they vote the other way. So there are, as for the Democrats, of course, we always start with the Democrats, since Biden is the incumbent president. There are 2 that Biden won by a safe margin, 3, my bad, or maybe even 4, no, just 3. There are 3 states that Biden won by a safe margin in 2020, but I think he would fall a few points short this time around. That would cause him to fall under 15%. That's Oregon, that's Illinois, that is New Jersey. We see in these three states, Biden won Oregon by 16, just over that safe margin threshold, Illinois by 17%, and New Jersey by just 15.9%. So I think that Biden, especially with really his young voter coalition, really crumbling due to the war in Gaza, I would think that especially in heavily Democratic states with large metropolitan areas, with large urban areas that do tend to be more progressive, I feel that Biden will be losing a lot of votes from those urban areas. So even though they are safe Democratic, I think that he will suffer significantly. But he does still win the states, so it doesn't really matter. And then we come to states like Colorado and New Mexico, which stays in line with how they voted back in 2020. So you can see Colorado voted for him by 13.5% and New Mexico by 10.8%. I think that New Mexico, it is trending somewhat Republican, the state of New Mexico. I could see Donald Trump make some improvements here, but I really don't see it being enough in a state like New Mexico. There's nothing to really cause it in these two states for it to be reduced to a lean margin or less. And as for Colorado, this is trending heavily towards the Democrats. This will be I used to have this state as a safe Democratic state in 2024. Since then, I've changed my position slightly. So, I would say that Colorado and New Mexico remain likely for the Democrats. I also think that Virginia will be likely for Joe Biden. He won it by 10 back in 2020. This is a state that really has turned away from Donald Trump ever since he became president. I mean, Hillary Clinton. This was a swing state back in 2012, and one of the few states where I believe Hillary Clinton actually did better than Barack Obama. That might be a stretch, actually. Yeah, no, she did. So Obama won it by 3.9%, and Hillary Clinton won it by 5.3%. So you can see Virginia has never been on Donald Trump's side, ever, and that is because of the really well-educated, more moderate centrist voters near Washington, D.C., in the northern part of the state. So this is a state that I think Biden actually is going to do pretty much the same as he did in 2020. So that brings us, let's see, so I believe that is it for likely Democratic states. Now moving on to likely Republican states, there are a few where Donald Trump, where Donald Trump is going to expand on his 2020 wins. That's states like Iowa and Ohio, states that voted for him by really stunning margins in 2016 here, 9.4% and 8.1%. You look at 2020, these were expected to be really close, and you see that Donald Trump barely lost anything. I mean, these were almost his exact margins from 2016. So these blue-collar workers, these Rust Belt voters in Iowa and Ohio especially, have really stuck by his side over the years, and I think that they will continue that in 2024. I also think that Maine's 2nd District, another place that really shows very little sign of shifting away towards Trump. He won it by 10 in 2016 and 7.5 in 2020 when a lot of people expected this district to flip blue. So I would say that Donald Trump definitely does hang on to Maine's 2nd Congressional District. And let's see, looking at the state of Texas, it doesn't really appear that the Democrats are targeting this one. Now, this is a state that has been overall trending blue in the last few years, especially during the Trump years. And back in 2020, especially after Donald Trump only won the state by 5.6%, it appeared that this was a state that Democrats could win in the future, that they could make inroads in and win, and that would be the end of the Republican Party, really, in presidential elections. Unless something insane happened, because once Texas goes blue, then it's over for Republicans in presidential elections. So Texas went to Trump by 5.6, as I said, but since then it really has been trending Republican, and it doesn't appear that this is a state that could go Democratic in the near future. That is because of the Latino vote, and we'll get to that with Arizona, Nevada, Texas, and Florida. The Latino vote has really been trending towards the Republicans in these past couple of years, really since 2020. And the Republicans have done very well with targeting that major voting bloc. In Florida and Texas, Donald Trump had insane numbers with Latinos in the state of Florida in 2020. That's why he won the state in 2020 by more than he did in 2016. So I would say that that Texas is a likely Republican state. Donald Trump only does better than he did in 2020, and I think that Florida is likely Republican. You see, as I mentioned, that he did better in 2020, where he won by 3.4%, than he did in 2016, where he won by 1.2%. Very few states trended Republican, shifted Republican in 2020 compared to 2016, but Florida was one of those states. And then, of course, Ron DeSantis famously won by 20% in his re-election gubernatorial bid in 2022, just to show you how Republican this state has become. So Florida, I definitely think, is a likely Republican state this time around. And Democrats, that's such an incompetent state Democratic Party, too. They are completely useless. So Alaska is interesting because it is trending heavily towards the Democrats. I mean, election after election, the House election, the Anchorage mayoral election. Anchorage is shifting so much Democratic, so much towards the left. But then again, Donald Trump did win it by 14.7% in that's 2016, sorry. He won it by 10.1%. So, if this entire national environment was a little more friendly towards Biden, I would say that this could become a lean state. But, state Democrats is one thing, who are good at campaigning and are popular candidates. But Biden is another. It's not like Biden is anyone popular. So even though I do think that Democrats do better, slightly better here, this state does trend towards the Democrats in 2024 compared to 2020. Very few states will, but I think that Alaska will be one of them. But it won't get narrow. It won't get more narrow than a likely margin. So that leaves us with only really a few states left, and we don't have any more likely Republican states. So that leaves us with 110 electoral votes to characterize. Joe Biden is at 209, and Donald Trump has taken the lead with 219. 270 again are needed to win. So now we move on to lean states. Lean states are states that will be decided by a 1 to 5% margin. So let's characterize these. Starting with New Hampshire, I think that New Hampshire is one that will be really close in 2024. These are really independent-minded voters who are willing to switch sides. I do think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gets a lot of the vote here. But that being said, the Democrats are running a really active campaign here from what I've seen. I mean, they are holding events after event, fundraising event after fundraising event, and I believe that, Biden actually visited the state somewhat recently. So they're running a pretty solid campaign, and from what I can tell, the Trump campaign really isn't targeting the state all that much. So I would say that New Hampshire does stay with Joe Biden on the track that things are going right now. I think that Nebraska's 2nd congressional district will go to Joe Biden by just about a percentage point in 2024. He won it by 6.6% in 2020, which is a really healthy margin. But this is a very suburban district, lots of families, and I believe that, Donald Trump, especially with all of these indictments and stuff, that does not help in suburbs, among parents, families. Maybe in rural areas, maybe in a Republican primary, but not in a general election where suburbs dominate, like in Nebraska 2nd. Now let's move on. So Maine at large is interesting. There was a poll that came out that actually showed Maine was really close, and I believe that, it showed Donald Trump winning the state, believe it or not. That's Maine's 2nd district. Maine at large, you can see that this poll showed Trump leading the state by 6%. Now, I do not trust the accuracy of that poll, but it does show you that Maine actually might be a pretty close state in 2024. Biden only won it by 9% in 2020. So I would say that this does get reduced to a lean margin, but I don't really see it getting any closer than that given his margin from 2020. Now let's move on to the state, let's see. So we're still on lean Democratic states. And I would say, based off of everything that we're seeing from Minnesota, every poll that I've seen shows him winning by a lean margin. And considering the fact that Hillary Clinton won the state by 1.5% a lean margin back in 2016, and she is the weakest of the weak candidates, I would say that Minnesota does go to Joe Biden by a lean margin. I don't think that is something that will surprise a lot of people. This is a pretty Democratic state in statewide elections. Democrats do very well here. They're well funded. They run generally good campaigns in Minnesota, and they haven't had much trouble in Minnesota, despite how politically independent and what a centrist this state is, which would help Joe Biden against someone like Trump. So that leaves us with our 7, I should say, core swing states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Now, it's tough. We're still on lean Democratic states here. I don't think he wins Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, any of these four by a lean margin. I think that is out of possibility right now. But I would say, from what we are seeing, I would say that Michigan does go to him by a lean margin. Now, this is largely due to the fact that the Democrats are now really worried about the state, and they are focusing on the state. They're putting lots of money into the Rust Belt because they know that their path to victory is the Rust Belt. They can win with just this map by winning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That would put him at 270 electoral votes. You can see right there. That's not my prediction. But that would put him at 270. And Donald Trump, even if Donald Trump takes every other state, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, then Biden still wins the election. So they're putting lots of money and really ramping up their campaign in the Rust Belt. And they are smart for doing that. They know that this will be a tough race, and they really need to do the math here, where Joe Biden has the easiest path to victory, and his path to victory is this area. Now, Michigan, I do think that in the end that the war in Gaza does significantly hurt him here, but I do think that he can really, and it appears that he's trying to do this, is make inroads in the suburbs. People who may not have turned out in 2020, or even if they did, just keeping his 2020 suburban more centrist, moderate, part of a family, right? Voters who are unhappy with Trump. Remember, January 6th happened after the election in 2020, and voters, I think that if Biden can run a good campaign, that voters will remember that. And Donald Trump is becoming increasingly unfavorable, and polls are reflecting that towards, more middle of the road type of voters, parents in the suburbs, or whatever. Now, this is very, very tough. So he won Michigan by 2.8 also back in 2020. But that's it for lean Democratic states. So as for Donald Trump, I definitely think that Nevada is a lean Democratic state, or lean Republican state. This is one that went to Biden by 2.4%. But, polls are really reflecting a Trump landslide in the state in 2024. Now, I don't think it's going to be anywhere near a margin like this. The average has Trump ahead by 7. I believe that is outlandish. But, that's big for Donald Trump. Just looking back at 2020, the polls showed that Biden would win by 5. So you can see that the polls, a lot of, in many cases, these same polling corporations showed Biden winning by 5 in 2020, and now this time around, Trump winning by 7. This is something that should really concern the Biden campaign. Georgia. There's another one, and this is a flip, as Nevada is from 2020. I think that Georgia does go to Donald Trump. In 2020, Georgia voted for Biden by the smallest amount of any state in terms of the percentage margin. He won it by just 0.2%. And I honestly think that this was a fluke. I mean, I'm not one to say that, many election results are a fluke. But I think that Biden got extremely lucky, I will say, with his turnout, with everything, which just managed to flip Georgia blue. Now in 2024, I don't think that this will be the case at all. I mean, so many African Americans are turning their backs on Biden, whether that mean not voting at all, voting for Donald Trump, or voting for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is at 13% among African Americans in one poll I saw nationwide. So that should definitely be something that Biden has to watch out for, because African Americans were essential to his 2020 victory in the state of Georgia. And then we come to a state that actually voted for Donald Trump in 2020, North Carolina, by a lean margin. I think that Donald Trump will be able to expand on his victory with low African American turnout for the Democrats. But I don't but Democrats are trying to run a good campaign here, and they are putting a lot of money into this state for some reason. So I don't see it getting above a 5% margin to make it a likely margin victory for them. So we are left with just 3 states, all of which I think will be tilt states. And Donald Trump has 257 electoral votes. Joe Biden has 241. Again, 270 are needed to win. So it all comes down to these 3 states. We still don't have a winner yet. So starting with the state of Arizona, I think that Biden wins this one by a tilt margin. And that is, this for a multitude of reasons. Now, I know Latino voters are trending away from the Democrats towards the Republicans across the nation. We haven't really seen much evidence of that in Arizona. If you look back at 2022, Democrats did excellent in this state. They won the governor election despite running the weakest candidate possible. They won the Senate election by something like 4%, almost a likely margin victory. And they won the state in 2020. Biden was able to flip the state, really in a surprise to most people. So, Arizona Democrats have proved time and time again that they run good candidates in Arizona, or that they run good campaigns in Arizona. And there's a Senate election in 2024 where Republicans are running Kari Lake, the weakest candidate possible. And I think that the Democrats actually here, Ruben Gallego, the Democratic nominee for Senate, actually has an opportunity to win by a likely margin, to win by more than 5%, which ultimately really boosts Biden down ballot. You usually see the presidential election affecting the Senate and gubernatorial races. But in this case, I think that the Senate election could really turn out Democrats to vote against Kari Lake and for Ruben Gallego, which would boost Biden's chances in the state. Not to mention how that abortion is a key factor in Arizona in 2024 in this election. It is top concern for a lot of voters' minds after the state legislature imposed that 1864 near total ban, right? And Democrats really have something to run on strong there. So Arizona, I think, does go to Joe Biden. Now, I think that Wisconsin goes to Donald Trump. Now, the Biden campaign is running a very strong campaign here. They have so many offices opening in Wisconsin, even in deep Republican areas. They are trying to clearly make inroads in these deep Republican areas, and I think that they will be very successful in doing that. But still, this state only voted for him by 0.63% in 2020. It was the smallest margin of the blue wall states, and it voted for Trump by the largest amount. This is just the closest. This state has the most Republicans of the 3 blue wall states. Trump, time and time again, really appeals strongly to the white working class voters of the state. But honestly, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I forgot to mention this in Michigan, but I think that Kennedy definitely plays a big factor here, because he now is the drain the swamp candidate, and he takes a lot of anti-establishment voters away, not from Joe Biden, because Biden was never the drain the swamp candidate, but from Donald Trump. These 2016 and 2020 Trump voters who voted for him because of how anti-establishment he is, a lot of them are now flocking to Kennedy. And there are a large group of those type of voters around the Rust Belt. This just tends to be a very anti-establishment area. So Wisconsin is close, but I still think it goes to Trump. Michigan goes to Biden, and it all comes down to Pennsylvania. Donald Trump just needs, whoever wins Pennsylvania, I guess, does win the presidency. And this just shows you how close I think this election will be. And I think that Biden wins Pennsylvania. And that is because, again, largely because just of the type of campaign that he's running. I mean, the campaign is opening so many campaign offices across Pennsylvania, as well as the Rust Belt, the Blue Wall. And they have so much money. They have hundreds of millions of dollars. And, they are running a better campaign. It appears so far that they did in 2020, given their circumstances with Biden's unpopularity, where, I think that they really can, get these suburban voters on their side, around Philadelphia. That will be critical. In Biden's victory in Pennsylvania in 2024, because, again, January 6th happened after the 2020 election. Biden has a lot of stuff to run on that would turn suburban voters away from Donald Trump. He has a lot more to run on when it comes to gaining suburban voters than he did in 2020. So I think in the end, Biden does win Pennsylvania, and that gives him 271 electoral votes, just one more than he needs to win, to Trump's 267. And overall, Biden wins the election by 4 electoral votes. Wouldn't that be something? So thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to drop a like and drop a subscription. Definitely also leave a comment. That helps out a lot. Also, again, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.